Story 1. The Curve on Mulholland Drive. I know how cliché it sounds. I picked up a hitchhiker, but it wasn't some dusty desert road cliché. It was Mulholland Drive, twisted and glittering under the Los Angeles moonlight, where everything feels surreal. I had just played a set at a small club near Franklin Village and was riding that quiet high that comes after applause fades. My beat-up Civic hummed along the curves like muscle memory. That's when I saw him, barefoot, shirtless, standing motionless near the reservoir sign. It didn't feel dangerous, it just felt wrong, like the scene had been rehearsed by something not quite human. I pulled over, impulsively, stupidly, and gestured for him to hop in. He didn't say a word, just slid into the passenger seat, dripping silence. His skin was pale, almost gray-blue under the dashboard light, and his eyes, they never left the cluster of gauges. Not once. I tried small talk, told him I was tired, joked that Mulholland always freaked me out. No response. Not even a nod. We hit that famous curve, the one where the road practically folds in on itself. And just then he turned, not to me, but to the empty back seat, like someone was already there. I blinked, just once, just long enough for my eyes to adjust to the road ahead. When I looked back at the passenger seat, it was empty. No sound, no door slam, no shift in the weight of the car, just gone. My heart didn't race, not immediately. I thought maybe he'd crawled into the back seat while I wasn't looking, so I reached for the rearview mirror. But what I saw made my chest tighten like a vice. There was no one, but the back seat belt was buckled. I didn't remember that. I drive alone, always. Even when I have gear in the car, I never use the back seats. That belt had a twist in it, like someone had pulled it down fast, then vanished. I slowed down, rolled my window halfway. Mulholland's curves usually felt like home. I've lived in LA for 10 years, but right then, they felt foreign, like I'd slipped into the wrong version of the city, like something was watching me from behind the trees. I drove the rest of the curve slower than usual, every shadow seeming to stretch toward the car like it knew something I didn't. I told myself he must have jumped out. Maybe I missed the sound, maybe I was more tired than I realized. I turned the music back on, low, just to fill the air. But no volume could drown the feeling crawling up the back of my neck, the kind that makes you check your rearview mirror, even when you know it's empty. I kept stealing glances, and that buckle, it stayed buckled. Back home, I parked and sat in silence, watching the seatbelt like it might unfasten itself. My apartment is small, a converted guest house tucked behind a larger place in the valley, usually comforting. But that night, it felt like I'd brought something with me. I checked the locks, looked under the bed, even opened the closet, irrational as it was. I didn't sleep. Every few minutes, I'd hear something soft, not outside, but in the walls, a scrape, then nothing. I kept trying to convince myself it was a rat, but rats don't whisper. The next morning, I tried to snap out of it, went to grab coffee, played some jazz to air out the vibe, but the barista paused when I handed over my card. She said it smelled weird, like damp wood, she muttered, wrinkling her nose. That's when I noticed it too. My clothes, my hands, my car, everything had that musky, swamp-like odor, like the reservoir. I hadn't stepped in water, hadn't gone near the edge, but the smell was there, like it belonged. When I got home, I pulled my phone out to check texts. That's when I saw it. A photo. I hadn't taken it. It wasn't saved in my camera roll, just a thumbnail preview in the notifications bar that vanished when I tapped it. But I saw enough. It was my dashboard. From the passenger side, gauges glowing, and right beside them, a pale knee, bare, motionless, like he'd never left. I wanted to delete the photo, but it wasn't there anymore. Not in the cloud, not in temporary folders. I checked for hidden files. Nothing. I even reset the phone, but I couldn't shake the sense that it had existed just long enough to show itself and then retreat. That night I drove past Mulholland again, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. Like the curve itself was pulling something from me. I slowed down near the spot. The shoulder was empty, but my radio crackled even though it was turned off. It whispered something, low and drawn out. I'd swear it said my name. I jerked the wheel and sped home, trying not to look in the mirrors. Back in my garage, I killed the engine and sat with the lights off, just breathing. The kind of breath where you're afraid of making sound, like noise might invite something closer. I stared ahead. The dashboard blinked once. No key on the ignition. No power. Just a brief flicker. Like it was remembering.
Had someone to illuminate. Weeks later, while scrolling through old news articles for something unrelated, I found it. A report from 2008. A fatal crash near the Hollywood Reservoir. Single driver. No passengers. The photos showed the wreck at the curve. What stopped me cold wasn't the damage or the car. It was the victim. Pale skin, shirtless, barefoot. They said he'd been walking before the crash. They never figured out why he'd wandered back onto the road, just disappeared from a nearby party, they said. I closed the laptop. But something's changed. My dashboard flickers sometimes, even when I'm not driving. That smell won't go away. And last night, as I locked up, I found the backseat buckle twisted again. If you've ever picked someone up who didn't speak, who didn't blink, who didn't belong, tell me. Please. I need to know I'm not the only one. Story 2. Beacon Hill's Last Ride. I used to drive nights around Boston, mostly for the silence and the sense of control it gave me. When you're behind the wheel, you get to decide where the story goes. That night, I took a detour through Beacon Hill. Not the smartest choice, considering the fog. Thick as soup. My GPS kept glitching out between the narrow streets and colonial facades. Right as I passed Acorn Street, the oldest cobblestone alley in the city, I saw her, standing perfectly still, almost backlit by the mist. No phone, no coat, just pale skin, thin hands clutched around a small handbag, and this faraway look in her eyes. She stepped toward the car slowly, like she wasn't sure it was real. When I rolled down the window, she asked, in this quiet, trembling voice, "Will my son be waiting?" Not once, but twice. Same tone, same pause between words. I nodded without thinking, already unlocking the doors. I figured maybe she was lost, maybe confused. There's a hospital a few blocks away. I told her I'd take her there. She climbed in without another word and kept her gaze fixed on the passenger window. I tried small talk, but it felt like I was speaking into a vacuum. She didn't blink once during the ride, not even when we stopped at red lights. Her eyes stayed locked onto the window. Not the glass itself, but something beyond it. I noticed how she held her bag tighter each time we passed a street lamp, like she was bracing for something to appear. I asked her name. She didn't answer, just muttered again, softer this time. "Will my son be waiting?" I told her yes, even though I wasn't sure anymore who or what I was speaking to. Then Right as we turned onto Mount Vernon Street, her reflection in the window shimmered, but she didn't move. I glanced quickly. She was gone. Just gone. The seat beside me was empty, but still warm. I slammed the brakes, checked the back seat, the sidewalk, everything. Nothing. No trace. My pulse was racing like hell. I kept whispering, What just happened? But there was no echo, like the fog had swallowed the sound itself. I sat there for a few seconds, paralyzed. Not from fear exactly, but confusion. It felt like my memory had just short-circuited. The air in the car grew heavier, dense, like something was still in the vehicle, watching. I turned on every light inside and checked the dashboard cam, hoping it had caught something. Nothing. Just blank footage where she had been sitting. No timestamp glitch, no audio. I started driving again, slower this time. Every time I passed a reflective surface, I looked for her. Out of desperation, I drove back toward Acorn Street. I thought maybe I could find her again. Maybe she had gotten out when I wasn't looking. But the alley was empty. Just fog. And this quiet that didn't feel right. I got out and walked the cobblestones. That's when I noticed something off. In the puddle near the alley entrance, I saw a single shoe. Small, dated, leather worn, like it hadn't seen use in decades. I picked it up, but it was dry. Completely dry. Even though the street was soaked. I took the shoe back to the car, unsure why. It didn't belong to anyone I knew. Didn't belong anywhere in this century. As I held it, a strange pressure built in my chest. Not pain exactly, but the kind of ache you feel when you're about to cry or scream. I tossed it onto the passenger seat, still half hoping she'd show up again and explain everything. But deep down, I knew. Whatever I'd picked up wasn't just old. It was wrong. It didn't belong in my hands, or anywhere near me. Back at my apartment, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying her voice, that eerie question, will my son be waiting? I opened my laptop to search for recent news, missing persons, historical records, anything that could connect her to a real event. That's when I found it. A reference to a widow who'd lost her child in the early 1800s. He vanished near Acorn Street during a cholera outbreak. People said she wandered the neighborhood for weeks, asking strangers if they'd seen her boy.
One article claimed her last sighting was on Mount Vernon, the same place she vanished from my car. The next morning, I visited the local historical society. I wasn't expecting much, maybe just a curator rolling their eyes at another ghost story, but the woman behind the desk froze when I mentioned Acorn Street. She asked what time I'd given the ride. I said just after midnight. Her face lost color. "You're not the first," she said. "But it's rare now, maybe every few years. Always the same description. Always the same question." I asked her if they'd ever found out who she was. The answer? No. But she handed me a photocopied page from an old diary. The handwriting was almost unreadable. It was a mother's account, desperate, grief-stricken. She wrote about waiting on cobblestones, looking into windows for her boy's reflection. One line stopped me cold. "I will ride with kindness if he waits by the light." It matched exactly, word for word, what I'd heard her whisper before vanishing. I left that office shaken. The fog had cleared outside, but something in my chest stayed heavy. As if the story hadn't ended yet. As if my part in it was still unfolding. I still keep that shoe, tucked in the glove compartment where no one else can see it. I don't know why, maybe to remind myself it actually happened. Maybe I'm scared to throw it away like it'll bring her back. But something's changed since that night. I've started seeing flickers in my mirror, just for a second, like someone standing behind me. And every once in a while, when I drive past Acorn Street, My GPS resets to midnight. No matter the time, just 12 a.m. And there's something else. A smell. Sweet, too sweet, like wilted flowers and dust. It creeps into the car when I least expect it. I've checked the vents, the upholstery, everything. Nothing explains it. Last week, I heard a voice in my rear view, a whisper, garbled, but it sounded like her. Same cadence, same sorrow. I turned around expecting to see her again. Empty. Just fog trailing behind me like a veil. And now I dread every nighttime drive. That's why I've stopped taking passengers near Beacon Hill. Not worth the risk. Not after her. But the strangest thing happened yesterday. I got a notification on my phone. Said, "Ride complete, 12:03 a.m." No origin, no drop-off. I checked the app history. It was blank, but the timestamp matched exactly the night she disappeared. I stared at it for a long time, trying to remember if I had blacked out. But no, I didn't drive that night. I stayed home. Or at least, I thought I did. Now, every foggy night feels like an invitation, like she's still out there, waiting, asking. Sometimes I dream of cobblestones under my feet, even though I'm not asleep. Sometimes I hear the door of my car open, even when I'm alone. I can't tell if it's memory, guilt, or something worse. All I know is, I'm not the same. And if you've ever driven through Beacon Hill, late at night, and seen something that shouldn't be there, please, say something. I need to know I'm not the only one. Story 3. The Stranger on I-95. I know what you're thinking. Why the hell would you pick up a hitchhiker in 2025? Trust me, I've asked myself the same thing 1,000 times. But it was broad daylight, I had just left Philly, and the guy didn't look like your typical drifter. Button-down shirt, neatly trimmed beard, and an old leather satchel that made him look more professor than serial killer. He stood near the cracked pavement of a rest stop I didn't even remember passing on the way in. Not on the map, just there. It felt oddly staged, but curiosity has always been my Achilles heel. He climbed in without a word at first. Then, with a tone like he was giving a ghost tour, he started pointing out historic landmarks along the freeway, places I damn well know aren't visible from I-95. He called out names and dates like a broken audio guide. Every Fort McHenry, 1814. Battle of North Point, September 12th. Except the windows showed nothing but endless trees and blurred exits. I laughed once and said, "You sure you're not just narrating a Wikipedia page?" He just smiled. That polite, tight-lipped kind of smile that felt rehearsed, maybe even mournful. We kept driving. He didn't ask where I was headed, didn't seem to care. His eyes stayed fixed on the horizon, like he was waiting for something, or someone. I tried to break the silence with a joke, something about old roadside attractions and how the internet killed mystery. He nodded slowly and muttered, "Not everything is online." That line hung in the air like stale smoke. I glanced at my GPS to double-check the route, but for some reason it had frozen. The icon still showed us moving, but the map? Blank. Just a faint outline of the highway. No labels, no towns. Then we passed what looked like a cemetery just off the shoulder, the kind with crooked iron gates and tombstones leaning like drunks. The trees around, nothing behind but a dented thermos and a half-smoked cigarette. I started listening a little harder, especially once I inherited his cabin on the edge of that fog-covered water. It's not much of a place. One room, bad plumbing, a view of reeds that move even when there's no wind.
I drove out last weekend, telling myself I'd fix it up, but mostly I wanted answers. Or maybe closure. I brought a flashlight, my uncle's journal, and a stubborn kind of curiosity that should have burned out years ago. The journal was mostly ramblings, bird sightings, weather notes, complaints about the plumbing, until I reached the final pages. Scrawled in hurried pen, my uncle had written, "If they come again, I won't run. I'll ask what they want." Then beneath that, "Don't trust the lights. They don't lead you out. They bring you deeper." I reread the lines 5 times. Maybe he was losing it, or maybe he knew something I didn't. Either way, I started keeping my flashlight on, even during the day. That night, just past 2 a.m., I heard tapping on the window. Rhythmic, measured. I sat up, heart banging. The reeds outside didn't move. No wind, no footsteps. Just tapping. I moved slowly toward the window, light in hand. When I peered out, there was nothing there, except 3 perfectly round lights hovering above the marsh, pulsing slowly like breath. That's when I realized they weren't reflections, they were watching. I stepped outside, flashlight cutting a weak cone through the fog. The lights hadn't moved, still hovering, still watching. I called out, not sure what I expected in response. They pulsed once, then slowly drifted inland. I followed, boots squelching in the mud, heart pounding. The reeds brushed against my coat like fingers, and for a moment I thought I heard whispering, my name, carried on wet wind. The light stopped beside a half-submerged stone, more like a monument than anything natural. Covered in moss and carved with symbols I didn't recognize. My uncle had drawn something similar in his journal. I remembered the page, "They mark where the ground listens." I leaned closer, and the symbols shimmered faintly. That's when the ground beneath me rumbled, like something deep was shifting, stretching, waking. I should have run, but I reached out instead. The second my fingers brushed the stone, the lights vanished. Not faded, vanished, like someone shut off the universe in that spot. The fog rushed in, swallowing everything. I couldn't see the cabin anymore, couldn't hear the wind, just silence, and the sensation of being watched by something very old. Then, footsteps, slow, squishing, coming closer. I turned the flashlight everywhere, but the beam seemed to shrink with every breath I took. The journal's last line echoed in my mind. "They don't walk, they float. If you hear footsteps, it's not them." A figure emerged, barely visible, like it was made from mist and regret. I saw the outline of a face, not human, not quite, and when it opened its mouth there was no sound, just the feeling of words in my head. He asked, you followed, now it listens to you. My legs were rooted, my breath short. I tried to speak, but the fog rushed into my mouth like it was trying to drown the words. Whatever my uncle had met out here, it hadn't finished with the family yet. I stumbled backward, the fog clinging to me like wet cloth. The figure dissolved, but the sensation of being watched didn't. I made it back to the cabin somehow, slammed the door, locked it, though I didn't think locks mattered anymore. I sat on the floor, journal open, flashlight flickering. Then I saw it. A new entry written in my uncle's messy scrawl. It heard me. It followed you. The ink was fresh. The date was today. That night, the tapping returned, this time on the cabin walls. From all sides, no footsteps, no voices, just steady rhythm, like fingers drumming out an ancient song. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I just listened, counting each tap, trying to find a pattern. I knew somehow that it wasn't trying to scare me. It was teaching me something, or warning me, but about what? I hadn't yet dared to understand. By morning, the tapping had stopped, but the cabin door was wide open. Outside, in the pale gray light, the fog had receded, leaving a trail of footprints from the monument to my doorstep. I followed them, flashlight still trembling in my grip, even though the sun was rising. When I reached the stone, something was waiting. Not the lights, not the figure, just a simple envelope with my name written in the same ink from the journal. Inside was a note, "It's yours now. Listen closely." I didn't leave that day, or the next, and I haven't since. The marsh speaks in ways that don't use words, and now I know what my uncle meant. People come here thinking they'll solve a mystery, but the marsh doesn't give answers. It gives roles. You don't escape it. You become part of it. And now I'm the one they will whisper about. The figure in the mist.
The tapping, the lights. If you find my cabin, turn around. And if the marsh calls, don't answer. Story 5. Midnight Fair in Times Square. I've been driving a yellow cab in Manhattan for 12 years. Nights are quieter, but they've got a pulse. Strange characters, odd requests, nothing I haven't seen. So when this guy in a tailored suit flagged me down near Times Square at 1:14 a.m. sharp, I didn't flinch. He looked crisp, not rich exactly, but meticulous, like he belonged to another decade. He slid into the back seat without a word until we hit 44th and 6th, then he spoke. Low and deliberate. "Grand Central," he said. "And has the show started?" I glanced at the rear view. His expression didn't change, just those sharp features staring dead ahead. I thought maybe he'd come from some off-Broadway thing. Belasco Theater was right up the block. I gave a short laugh, said, "Don't know, buddy. Curtains don't open till after midnight, I guess." Then he turned, not toward me, toward the alley next to Belasco. Stared, unblinking. I glanced back to see what had caught his attention, but there was nothing. Just the narrow alley between the buildings, half choked with steam from a vent and a crumpled soda can rolling slowly across the concrete. I turned to make some dumb comment about rats doing Shakespeare back there, but he wasn't in the seat anymore. It was empty. Door closed. No sound, no movement, just gone. I braked so hard, the meter reset, heart thudding, not out of fear, but confusion. I turned on the dome light, checked the back seat. Nothing. Not a damn thing. My first thought, maybe he ducked out while I wasn't looking. But how? No slam of the door, no jingle from the handle, no shift in weight. I was moving the whole time, unless he jumped out mid-ride, which would have been physically impossible. That's when the hairs on my arm started rising, slowly, like static. Not from panic, from the feeling that someone was watching me, closely, but nowhere I could see. I pulled the cab into a parking lane, reached for my phone, and checked the in-car camera feed. I swear to God, every frame showed me. Just me. No one ever got in. I sat there with the engine idling, still watching the footage loop. Just me. Just the seat. No movement. I rewound 5 times, looked frame by frame. The timestamp matched. 1:14 a.m., the cab pulled up. I slowed. I remember him stepping in. I remember him. The weight of the seat shifted. His voice. That question. And yet, he wasn't there. Not once. That's when something started gnawing at me from the back of my brain, like deja vu, but twisted. Had I picked him up before? My fingers trembled slightly as I typed Belasco Theater disappearances into my phone. First hit, an old thread from 2011 about actors who died mid-performance and were still seen on stage decades later. Another post mentioned cabbies who claimed to pick up a man in a suit near Times Square only for him to vanish before reaching Grand Central. I wouldn't have taken it seriously, but the descriptions were disturbingly specific, and I swear one of the usernames looked familiar, like I'd seen it before. Maybe last week? I didn't tell anyone at first, just kept driving like nothing happened. But when I passed Belasco again 2 nights later, something made me glance down that same alley. I don't know what I expected. Maybe closure, maybe nothing. But there, in the shadows, I thought I saw someone standing, perfectly still. I didn't stop, just a glance. Could have been a poster, a trash bag, hell, a reflection. But I couldn't shake the thought that it was him, watching. The next night, I parked near Grand Central before my shift ended. Walked the length of the terminal, acting casual like I had a reason to be there. I stared at the flow of people, waiting to recognize that tailored suit, that face. I even checked the live security monitors near the info desk, hoping he'd just appear. Nothing. Just commuters, tourists, and the usual late-night drifters. I was about to leave when I saw it. One monitor flashed static, then showed a cab. My cab. Parked. Empty. But the timestamp read 1:14 a.m. That night when I got back to the garage, I asked to pull the dashcam footage from earlier that week, just to compare timestamps. My supervisor raised an eyebrow, said I'd been acting off lately. I brushed it off, waited till he left, and scrubbed through the files myself. The one from Tuesday, the night he vanished, was shorter than usual. It ended at 1:14 a.m. Cut clean. No error message, just stopped. And the audio. There was nothing. No traffic, no hum, dead silence, as if the cab had entered a vacuum. I took the footage home, watched it again, this time with headphones. I turned the volume all the way up, expecting static. At first, nothing. Then something faint, barely perceptible under the silence. A breath? No, too soft, more like whispering, but layered, like a crowd murmuring behind a curtain. I boosted the gain.
I isolated the frequencies. One phrase came through, not from the back seat, from behind the car. He never left. I tried to forget it, swore I would, but something started changing. The cab felt different. I'd park it for brakes, and when I returned, the driver's seat would be pushed back, radio tuned to static. Once I found a faint print, not a shoe, not a hand. Something smudged on the glass, like someone had leaned in from the outside and pressed their face to the window. I rubbed it off. It came back the next night. Sleep got harder. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd hear that question, has the show started? And sometimes I'd wake with the feeling I'd been answering it, out loud. I started avoiding Times Square, rerouting fares just to stay clear of 44th Street. But one night, in dead traffic, I got boxed in right in front of Belasco. And I swear to you, I saw my cab parked in the alley. I got out, walked toward the alley. My cab was parked exactly like it had been that night, except it wasn't my cab. The plate was off by 1 digit. The rearview mirror was cracked. Inside, on the dash, was an old playbill for a show at Belasco from 1982. The pages were curled like they'd been wet. I stepped closer, trying to make sense of it, when a voice drifted from behind me. Calm. Familiar. You're late. I turned fast, but nothing. Just steam and silence, and the faint smell of cologne I hadn't worn. I quit driving the night after that, sold the cab, moved out of the city. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear the meter click on. Soft, distant, like it's waiting. I haven't gone near Times Square since, but I dream of it. The alleys, that question, that man, and always the same ending. Him staring at me through the rearview mirror, mouth unmoving, voice inside my head. The show never ends. If anyone has ever picked up someone near Belasco who didn't show up on camera, please comment. I need to know I wasn't alone out there. I need to know he chose someone else now. Not me. Not again.
I isolated the frequencies. One phrase came through, not from the back seat, from behind the car. He never left. I tried to forget it, swore I would, but something started changing. The cab felt different. I'd park it for brakes, and when I returned, the driver's seat would be pushed back, radio tuned to static. Once, I found a faint print. Not a shoe, not a hand. Something smudged on the glass, like someone had leaned in from the outside and pressed their face to the window. I rubbed it off. It came back the next night. Sleep got harder. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd hear that question, has the show started? And sometimes I'd wake with the feeling I'd been answering it out loud. I started avoiding Times Square, rerouting fares just to stay clear of 44th Street. But one night, in dead traffic, I got boxed in right in front of Belasco. And I swear to you, I saw my cab parked in the alley. I got out, walked toward the alley. My cab was parked exactly like it had been that night, except it wasn't my cab. The plate was off by one digit. The rearview mirror was cracked. Inside, on the dash, was an old playbill for a show at Belasco from 1982. The pages were curled like they'd been wet. I stepped closer, trying to make sense of it, when a voice drifted from behind me. Calm, familiar. You're late. I turned fast, but nothing, just steam and silence, and the faint smell of cologne I hadn't worn. I quit driving the night after that, sold the cab, moved out of the city. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear the meter click on, soft, distant, like it's rating. I haven't gone near Times Square since, but I dream of it. The alleys, that question, that man, and always the same ending. Him staring at me through the rearview mirror, mouth unmoving, voice inside my head. The show never ends. If anyone has ever picked up someone near Belasco who didn't show up on camera, please comment. I need to know I wasn't alone out there. I need to know he chose someone else now. Not me. Not again.